we kind of have no choice but to live. So I think our best bet is to just learn how to suffer existence. Hello everyone, welcome to episode number 109 of Movies Are Awesome, the show all about the wonderful world of movies. My name is Nathan Pottle. Thank you so much for joining me today. And first thing I want to say, before I start anything else, I haven't done an episode in a couple of weeks, and I think that today is going to be my last episode, and I have a couple different reasons on why I'm going to stop doing the show, at least for a while. Lately, the last few episodes, it's been feeling that my heart isn't in it as much as it used to be. You know, this is something that I did just as a hobby, and it was fun and sitting down, but now it feels like, okay, now I have to do the podcast this week. I need to think of something to talk about, or I need to set time aside for doing this, and it was supposed to be more of a creative outlet for me than anything else, and it doesn't feel like that anymore. So I think that maybe the podcast has run its course with as far as I want to go with it and what I wanted to do with it, and to just talk about movies and stuff, I feel like it's just not doing it for me anymore. So I think today's going to be my last episode, and what I would like to try doing instead is, for a long time I've thought about having a go at writing my own book. So I think I'm going to try doing that. I have a story idea of what I want to do, and that's what I'm going to use my creative free time with now instead of doing the show. So for everyone who's been listening to the show, thank you so much for that. It means a lot to me that people have actually been listening to the show and enjoying it for the most part, it seems. Not too many people reach out to me about how they think about the show. They just listen to it passively, which is fine. I don't reach out to any of the shows that I listen to, so it's totally fine, but you guys are out there. Thank you so much. We're going to talk today about Black Widow. Now, Black Widow is the newest Marvel movie. We're back in theaters with Marvel. The last one that we got was Spider-Man Far From Home in 2019, so it's been almost 2 full years since we've gotten a new Marvel movie, so I was really excited to check this one out, and thankfully I had theaters open so that I could actually go and watch it in a theater and have that experience. If you're only able to watch it at home through Disney+, that's totally cool too, because that's exactly what I would have done if I wasn't able to go to the theater. So let's talk about Black Widow here. It's directed by Kate Shortland, who hasn't really directed much else of note that I have heard of. And the story of this movie, basically, we're looking at Natasha Romanoff, who is Black Widow, and this movie takes place almost immediately after Captain America Civil War, where she's on the run and being hunted down, and there's the Sokovia Accords and all these different things happening, and she ends up becoming entangled with her sister from another life who experienced the Red Room as well and is a trained killer, and she has this family reunion of sorts, and they go to take down the Red Room to make sure no other girls get taken against their will and are trained in this brutal, sadistic type way, and they're on a mission to take down those pesky Russians. And of course, as always, I'll do non-spoilers first and then move into spoilers, but actually, to be completely honest, there's not a lot to spoil in this movie. It's a pretty basic story, and we're just going along for the ride. There's no huge revelations. It does have a very interesting post-credit scene, which I'll talk about in the spoiler section, but for the most part, this is a pretty cut and dry basic story, and it's more the characters than anything that are getting you through it, and that's really what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is all about, is very clearly defined characters. And Black Widow, of course, we've been seeing her in movies since 2010. She first appeared in Iron Man 2 as Natalie Rushman was her undercover name, and then she revealed herself to be Natasha Romanoff, the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who formerly worked with the Russians as a super killer spy lady. And now she's gone through this whole arc through these movies, and now we see her taking down the people who created her, essentially. And I find it very interesting. And she puts out a pretty good performance. I think actually the best performance in this movie is by Florence Pugh, who plays her sister. The character's name is Yelena, and she is just the best part of this. And her story and where she's going is what I am most interested in the MCU going forward. Like, WandaVision was great, and I want to see what's going on with the Scarlet Witch going forward. That's really great. I'm really enjoying Loki so far. We only have one episode left. It's coming out tomorrow. It will already be out by the time I drop this episode, so Loki has been really good, and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We have a lot of really interesting stuff moving forward, but I am most interested in Yelena and where she's going and what she's going to be doing, because she was just so fascinating to me. She was funny, she was heartfelt, she was relatable. Like, I have a complete and utter understanding of the character of Yelena, and I find she was so well portrayed by Florence Pugh. I think that's how her last name is pronounced, as spelled P-U-G-H, so Pugh or Puh. I have no idea. I'm going to say Florence Pugh. I don't know how it's actually pronounced, though, so if I'm wrong, sorry about that, but that's what I'm going to go with for now. And I've only seen her really in one other thing. I saw her in Little Women, and I really liked her in Little Women. I also really like that movie as a whole. I think it has a magnificent cast, and it's a really well-told story. If you haven't seen Little Women, it is on Amazon Prime, so you can go check it out for free, which is pretty dope. And I actually also discovered this morning that A Quiet Place Part 2 is on Amazon Prime. So if you're in Canada for sure, and you have Amazon Prime, you can go check out A Quiet Place Part 2 for free. Like, if you have the subscription, it's included, which is kind of crazy to me because I only just saw it in theaters a few weeks ago, and here it is already available on streaming. So go check out A Quiet Place Part 2, go check out Little Women, and Florence Pugh is also in Midsummer, which is on Amazon Prime as well, which I have not seen because, from what I understand of the story, I don't think I would really enjoy it because it's kind of like a more dark and disturbing type story, but I hear that her performance in that is really good too. So we have a really talented actress here playing a really interesting character who has very promising things coming her way in future movies and series. And then we also have David Harbour, who plays Red Guardian, and we have Rachel Weisz, who plays his maybe wife or maybe ex-wife. It's never completely clear, and these four people are this family, quote-unquote, and they're teaming up and they're going to take down the Russians. David Harbour's character, at the beginning, he's in prison, and they have to break him out, and there's this huge action sequence, and the action sequences of this movie actually is probably my biggest issue with the whole movie, because they're so absurd and over the top that it makes me scratch my head and wonder, like, how did they survive this? Like, you know, in Avengers Endgame when Thanos destroys Avengers Campus or Avengers wherever their base is, and he just like bombards it with missiles and everyone's okay? It's like that, except the whole movie. There is no way that these people should have survived some of these action sequences, especially when it comes to the flips and stunts that they're doing when they're breaking David Harbour out of prison, and then at the end when they have the big spectacle action sequence, it really, it just, like, these people should all be dead. They should definitely, zero survivors, everyone's dead. I don't buy it for a second, and it kind of took me out of the movie, especially because the rest of the movie, it was really promising to be something different. And especially right from the beginning of the movie, where we have this magnificent opening credit sequence where there's this slow cover of, what is the name of the song? Smells Like Teen Spirit. It's this really slow, dramatic cover version of this song, and we're seeing shots of girls in the red room and all, and like the way it's edited, I can't quite describe. It's like a grunge type slow dramatic edit, and it's really powerful and a really strong opening to the movie. So I don't understand why we would be given something so different, and then by the time we get to the end of the movie, we just fall into our normal Marvel third act big action spectacle. What I would have liked instead is to have something a little more personal, a little more intimate, and we don't really need the big, huge spectacle. And one example I love to circle back to is Captain America Civil War, where that movie's big action sequence is in the middle of the movie. And that's the airport fight scene, obviously. And then when we get to the end of the movie, it's actually a very personal climactic battle. It's just Captain America, Steve Rogers, and Bucky Barnes. And they're just in a room and they're punching each other in the face. And that's the entire third act. It's not this huge action spectacle. It subverts your expectations in that way, and it has a lot more emotional and personal impact on the viewer as opposed to Black Widow diving through the sky and the buildings are exploding around her and she's just like dodging all of this flying debris. It's nowhere near on the same level of impact. And I feel like Black Widow suffers in the same way that Iron Man 3 did, because what Iron Man 3 was doing right up until the end was very fascinating. Tony was suffering through PTSD of the event of the Avengers, and he's having these panic attacks and these fits, and it's something that's torturing him throughout the whole film. And then we get to the end and it's just explosions and Iron Man punching people and I am the Mandarin, and it just kind of falls apart when you get to the end. And that's what happens here with Black Widow. Even though I really liked everything up until that point, unfortunately, when we get to the end, it ends up falling a little bit flat. So even though Black Widow is a good movie and I like it and I'm gonna watch it again, probably not in theaters, but I'll watch it again at home, like I'll pick up a Blu-ray of it. So even though I liked it, it's certainly not perfect. It's not top tier Marvel, not by a long shot. I would say it's kind of like middle to upper middle tier Marvel. Like, it's probably the best movie that we've gotten since Black Panther or Thor Ragnarok, but it's better than Spider-Man Far From Home. It's better than Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. It is better than other movies, but it kind of falls in the middle there. And that still means it's a pretty good movie, because Marvel's released some really fantastic films. So I want to say that overall, yes, I did like it. We have good moments of humor. We have really good emotional scenes, especially with Yelena and Scarlett Johansson. One thing I would have wished out of this movie is a little bit more stuff from the Red Room, and just to showcase how awful of a place this is. We didn't get as much of it, and then we have the villain of Taskmaster, which I'm going to talk about in spoilers, and that's like a whole thing that people on the internet are upset about. So yeah, I'm going to say Black Widow is good. I liked it, and I want to watch it again, but it's not without its flaws. There's issues with it, and it's not stuff I'm willing to forgive, because it suspends my disbelief, and there are different things that they could have done that would have made the movie more dramatic and more impactful. And so that's what I'm going to say about Black Widow. We're going to move into spoilers now, and there's really only 3 points I want to talk about. One of them is Taskmaster. Now, I am not terribly familiar with this character from the comics, so the way the character is in the movie didn't particularly bother me, but there's a lot of people on Twitter and Instagram that I've seen who are just lit up about Taskmaster, saying that they ruined the character. I actually don't know how the character was ruined, so that's not something I can really speak of, but overall, I thought the character was just kind of there and didn't have a ton to do. So, if anything, I'm more disappointed by the fact that we weren't given a proper villain with a proper arc, but this is a Marvel movie, so what's new with that, right? Like, how many Marvel villains have we had that we can say are, like, really, truly exceptional villains, right? Like, I can name them off of one hand. I can say Loki, I can say Thanos, I can say Killmonger, and I can say, I don't know. That's it. Like, those are like the 3 memorable, really solid villains of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And everything else kind of falls to the wayside in terms of villains, because that's not what the Marvel movies are about. It's more about your main characters and connecting with them and going on their journey. And sometimes the main villains don't even really matter at all. Like, going back to Captain America Civil War, like, this is more about a conflict between Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, not between Steve Rogers and the Baron. So having a weak villain in this movie doesn't terribly surprise me, nor does it terribly let me down, but we could have had something a little more interesting as far as that goes. One other point I wanted to make is this floating fortress in the sky, like where the Red Room is, and the whole thing explodes. I kind of talked about like buildings exploding around her, but like everyone just like jumps out of the building and everyone is skydiving all of a sudden, but nobody has parachutes. So how are any of these people expecting to survive? And then all of them survive. Like, I don't understand. Like, it was a thing that bothered me so much that it did actually check me out of the movie for a little bit here. And I just didn't have any investment into what was happening. Like, it was so ridiculous. I said, okay, like, well, they're obviously going to survive because this is a prequel and we're going to have the continuing stories of these characters. It's something that's gonna be okay. But I just wanted something that wasn't so absurd. The only other points that I wanted to bring up is I want to talk about the post-credit scene. And the post-credit scene brings us back to modern day, where Black Widow is now dead because of the events of Avengers Endgame, and Yelena goes to her gravesite. Obviously, there's no body because she died on a planet that wasn't Earth. So Yelena goes to the gravesite and she's paying her respects to her sister, and then we get Val. She shows up. Now, if you've seen The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you will have seen Val. She's played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who is most famous for playing Elaine in Seinfeld, and she has now appeared in Falcon and Winter Soldier, and now here she is in Black Widow, and she is up to something, because it seems that she has recruited Yelena to doing stuff for her, and she's also got U.S. agent working for him, John Walker from Falcon and Winter Soldier, and she's plotting something, and maybe she's building some kind of team of her own. Like, who knows really what's going on here. In some versions of the comics, she works for Hydra. In some versions, she is just like an American person who works for the government and like has a team going. So I don't know what's going on, but I'm very interested, especially because she sends Yelena to go kill Hawkeye. And then I think that Florence Pugh is going to appear in the Hawkeye TV series. I think I saw that online somewhere, and me and my brother were talking about it as well. So I'm pretty sure that that's what's going to be happening. And I'm just very interested to see what's going on with that storyline. Where are things going? What do they have planned for Marvel Phase 4 as we are now in? There's a lot of really interesting stuff to think about and to be excited about, and I'm looking forward to all of it. Like I said, the end of Loki, I can't wait to watch it. The Hawkeye show, when we get Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, it looks great. Spider-Man, if we ever get a trailer for it, I'll happily be excited for it. Eternals looks pretty good too. So we have a lot of things in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to look forward to. I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this movie though, so I'm gonna wrap things up. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the show. I have really appreciated it, and we're at the end here, and it's fine. Will I return to the show one day? Probably, yes. But still, if anyone's ever wanting to reach out, I'm going to keep the Instagram going and just talk about movies on Instagram through the pictures and stuff that I post, so you can check out the show on Instagram. It's Movies Are Awesome Podcast at Instagram, and you can find me on Twitter at Pottle Nathan. I would say to subscribe to the show, which I usually do at the end, but because I'm not going to be making any more of these, I don't think that's completely necessary to mention, but the show can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and a whole bunch of other places. So you can check it out there. When I stop my podcast account, I don't know if the episodes will disappear or not. I'm not sure exactly how that works. I'm going to have to look into it. But so once again, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And as always, if you have nothing else to do, go watch more movies.